All right, I'm very excited to move on to the next part of our program, which will now have us welcoming Dr. Lawrence Yun, Chief Economist of Research, and Nadia Evangelou, Senior Economist, Research, National Association of Realtors, to present NAR Economic Housing and Commercial Real Estate Forecast. And I have to say before I go into their bios that I am truly honored and grateful to to have them here today. But I am very honored to have the pleasure of working with Dr. Yun and Nadia over the last few years with my involvement in the research committee. So to have them here today presenting to our entire membership is beyond anything I could have imagined. So thank you for being here today. Dr. Lawrence Yun is the chief economist and oversees the research group at the National Association of Realtors. He supervises and is responsible for a wide range of research activities for the association, including NAR's existing home sale statistics, affordability index, and the home buyer and seller profile report. He regularly provides commentary on real estate market trends. Dr. Yun creates NAR's forecast and participates in many economic forecasting panels, among them being Blue Chip Council and the Wall Street Journal Forecasting Survey. He also participates in the Industrial Economist Discussion Group at the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University. He appears regularly on financial news outlets, is a frequent speaker at real estate conferences throughout the United States, and has testified before Congress. Dr. Yun has also appeared as a guest on C-SPAN's Washington Journal. In 2025, the Wall Street Journal congratulated him for having one of the closest forecasts for 2024. Dr. Yun received his undergraduate degree from Purdue University and earned his PhD from the University of Maryland at College Park. We are so happy to have you here with us today. Welcome, Dr. Yun. Nadia Evangelou is a senior economist and director of real estate research at the National Association of Realtors. While all real estate is local, she focuses on regional and local market trends, including the effects on changing demographic and migration patterns. Nadia has been involved in research and analysis on local housing affordability conditions and local solutions to increase housing inventory. She also studies the effects of federal policies on the real estate market. Nadia holds a master's degree in applied economics from Johns Hopkins University, as well as advanced degrees in international European economics and public administration. We are so happy to have you here with us today as well. Welcome, Nadia.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for the great introduction. And good morning, everyone. So it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. So I will say you're always on the front lines of helping families and businesses make some of the most important decisions of their lives, like buying a first home, moving into a larger one, investing in property, or finding the right office or retail space. As an economist, I spend a lot of time looking at numbers and charts, but what excites me most about days like today is putting those numbers into context, connecting them to the real stories of buyers, sellers, and investors right here, on Long Island, where we are. So when I look at this region, I have to say that one word comes to my mind: resilient. So Long Island has faced affordability hurdles, inventory shortages, and shifts in how we work and live. But yet the market continues to adapt. People still want to live here, raise families here, and invest here. So today I want to take you on a journey. We will start with the residential market, home prices, sales activity, for affordability, and the kinds of people who are moving here. Then we will switch over to the commercial market, like office, multifamily, and industrial. And finally, we will talk about what to expect from the market, what this means for you. So my goal isn't just to throw numbers at you, but to explain what's really happening in your market. So I will start sharing my screen. Just bear with me, just one. Perfect. I think that everybody can see the screen now. So let's start with the residential real estate. So if we look back to 2019, before the pandemic. The median home price in Nassau County was about like $555,000. Today, it's $860,000. So that's a jump of 55% what we see like in that specific county. In Suffolk County, prices went from almost like $430,000 to $700,000, which is like a 64 increase compared to 2018. So think about that like a moment. In just 6 years, prices have risen like by more than half. That kind of appreciation is phenomenal, I would say, for homeowners. It means stronger equity like positions, more wealth, and in many cases, like more stability. But here's the flip side. So for buyers, that means entry like points into the market have gotten like much tougher. So when we look at sales, the story comes full circle. Like from January through July of this year. So the year to end, like the year to date, like figure. So Nassau County, we see had about like 44,300 like closed sales. Back in 2019 again, that number was about 5,900 home sales, which is about like a 28% like decline. Suffolk County fell from 8,530 closed sales to about like 5,700 like sales, which is about like a 33% like decline. So we get two different stories. Prices go up while sales like go down. So this can tell us like something very important. So demand is still here, but affordability is the barrier. So let me pause here for a second. How many of you like in this here like have clients who are still eager to buy, but just can make the numbers work right now? So I think exactly that's the question we need to have, and you see this like every day. You see that with your interaction like every day with your clients. So affordability is the headline story. In Nassau County, a typical monthly mortgage payment is now around $4,350. So to comfortably qualify for that, a household needs an income of about $210,000. But what we see is that the typical family in Nassau County earns closer to $180,000, so less than $200,000. And that's a gap of nearly like $30,000. Then in Suffolk County, again, so where prices are lower, relatively like lower than in Nassau County, the monthly payments are lower, about like $3,600. But families there earn around $160,000, which means that they're still short of the $170,000 income needed to qualify. So we get a mismatch, and these numbers here can show this mismatch. So the demand is there, people want to buy, but the math again like doesn't add up. And affordability isn't just about prices. Of course, it's about inventory, as you know better than anyone else. So when supply is constrained, competition like drives prices up further, and this is what happened in the recent like years, and we have seen these strong price gains that we see in both counties, putting like even like more pressure like on buyers. Which brings me now to supply. So what we see is that in Nassau County, new building permits are down about 49% compared to the long-term average, compared to the pre-pandemic like historical average that we have. So in Suffolk County is also down, though not as much, about like 16%, as you can see here in the slide. So think about what that means again. So at a time when we desperately need more homes, and especially affordable ones, fewer are being built. So that keeps the pipeline, I will say, thin. And let's be clear, like new construction is not just about like adding home. It's about adding the right kinds of homes. So smaller, more affordable homes for first-time buyers, townhomes, for example, that appeal like to downsizing, like to empty nesters, like and multifamily like options that give like renters a foothold. So without these, we keep squeezing the middle, and based on our recent study, we see that even though there are like more homes out there, still affordability keeps many buyers out of the market at the national level as well. But now let's talk about something really encouraging, that more people are moving in this area compared to the recent years. So let's talk about migration, because at the end of the day, markets, what we see is that markets move where people move, and who is moving to Long Island or staying here says a lot about the future of our housing demand. So what do we get? So we get that both Nassau and Suffolk counties are attracting more residents. But looking at the domestic migration, both of these counties continue to lose residents, but they lose less than what they did in 2022 and 2023, for example. Specifically, we see that the net migration in 2024 was about minus 4,400 for the Nassau County, which means that lost more about 4,400 residents, and about Suffolk County lost about 6,500 residents. However, in 2023, Nassau County lost about 9,900 residents, and in Suffolk about 12,000. In 2022, both of these counties, as you can see here in the slide, they lost even more people. So, however, when we look at net migration, so we see domestic migration, even though they're still losing, it's getting better. They're losing less and less, fewer and fewer residents than they did in the recent years. However, when we look at net migration, that includes the international migration as well, both of these counties had migration gains in 2024. So in fact, both Suffolk and Nassau County were able to turn the migration losses of the previous years to gains in 2024. And that's really important. Why? Because it indicates that Long Island attracts more new households. And that's a sign of strength, I will say. So, and this is something that we want to see to continue in the next years as well. Then, of course, we're wondering from where these movers are coming. So from where these two counties are attractive to who. So IRS data is able to identify the origin of those movers. So, and what we see is that people moving into Long Island are often coming from other parts of New York area. So over 70% of the movers came to Nassau County from Queens, Suffolk, Kings County, New York, and Bronx. And the same story as well happens for Suffolk County, about 70% there as well. Movers came from Nassau, Queens, Kings, New York, and Bronx. So that means that there is an ongoing pipeline of demand for housing, which is good news for all of you. So, and we see that most of them, they're moving from areas. We're able to identify that they're moving from areas that are closer, very close adjacent counties in both Nassau and Suffolk counties. So we see an improvement in migration, but what we are also able to identify are the characteristics of the buyers in the area. In fact, I think it's a good idea to put some faces in these numbers. So in Suffolk County, we will call our, call our typical buyer Jenna. We get that Jenna is 40 years old, and her household income is around $115,000. She represents about, I would say, 4% of all homeowners in the area. Only 19% of the Suffolk home buyers, recent buyers, hold an advanced degree, and what we see which is lower than the Nassau and the national average. Then we also get that about 6% moves from a different state and bought their home, which is significantly lower than the typical US buyer. However, this confirms as well the data that we already mentioned, that most of the movers come from adjacent counties. Then demographically, Suffolk has more Hispanic home buyers, about 22%, with white home buyers still close to 60%, 59%. So let's move now and take a look to see who is the home buyer like in Nassau County. So let's call this persona like Michael. So in Nassau County, our persona is Michael. So Michael is 41 years old with a median household income close to $140,000, so much higher than Jenna's. Roughly, we see that roughly 30% of Nassau homeowners hold an advanced degree, so he's more likely than also, as we can see from the data, to be married, like 51% of the home buyers, the recent buyers. And the community is more diverse in terms of Asian and Black population. So Asian homeowners make up about like 15% of the buyers, recent buyers in Nassau County, compared to just like 9% like in Suffolk County. And nationally, let's compare that to Joe's. Like Joe's, who is like the typical US buyer, based on the data that we have, is 42 years old, earns about $99,000, so less than $100,000, and about like 16% of the homeowners like him moved from another state. So the national picture is less wealthy and a bit like more mobile than when we compare with the profile, Jenna's profile, who represents the typical buyer in the Suffolk County, and Michael, who is the typical buyer in Nassau County. But apart from the demographics of the buyers, we are also able to identify what kind of homes they purchase. For example, in Nassau, the median property value is around $685,000. More than 2/3 of the homes were built before the 1960s. We see also that property taxes, as expected, average over like $10,000 a year, and monthly housing cost is like $4,000. So that means buyers here aren't just stretching to buy, but they're stretching as well to maintain, to keep going, like to afford to own the homes. In Suffolk County, we see pretty much the same homes, a little bit like less expensive, but it's interesting to see that there are more cash buyers in this county than in Nassau or nationwide, at 36%, and this is a very strong share of cash buyers. Then property taxes, as expected as well, are significantly higher than the national level. Nationally, like buyers like Joe's face property taxes of just like less than $1,300, and median monthly cost around like $1,900, so less than $2,000. So compared to Long Island, it's a night a day, I will say, the national with these two counties. But why all this like matter like for you? Because these personas, I will say, reflect the kinds of conversations that you're having like with clients. Like Nassau County clients are more likely to ask, can we handle these taxes like long term? While Suffolk clients are often saying, can we find a newer like home that fits like our budget? And if you're working with relocating like clients, you will need to explain why property costs like here are so different from what they see like in other states. So these are the profile of the buyers and what kind of like properties are purchasing as well based on the data. Now, let's talk about the wild card, I will say. So mortgage rates, about the mortgage rates and how they can affect the local market. As you know, the Federal Reserve will likely drop rates like next week, as soon as next week. So recently we did an analysis about like what lower mortgage rates will mean like for the housing market. So what we did is that we computed how many households can afford to purchase the median price home with a 7% rate, mortgage rate, and then how many they can afford to buy with a 6% mortgage rate. So specifically at 7% rate, only 125,000 households in Nassau County can afford to the median price home in that area. If rates fall to 6%, that number jumps to 145,000. So in Suffolk County, the same shift opens like the door to for 176,000 like households. But as not all of these, since not all of these additional like households will not purchase like a home, this is what we see. We don't expect all of them to buy a home. we estimate that about like 10% of the households typically do. That here's the we estimate that if rate drops drop to 6%, we could see an additional about 2,600 sales, additional 2,600 sales in Suffolk County, and about like, over 2,000 sales in Nassau County over the next 12 to 18 months. So that's not just a blip, that's the potential for a busier and more competitive market. So when you hear clients asking, should I wait for rates to fall? You can remind them that waiting might mean jumping back into a crowded like market. In the meantime, the market has already priced in some of the effects of the upcoming like rate cut from the Fed. It's about like 6.5 according to Freddie Mac, which is like the lowest level that we have mortgage rates since almost a year ago. So in October of 2024. I think now we covered.
Let me interrupt here. Nadia, thank you. And you will continue on the commercial real estate. But I have the sort of time squeeze, and unfortunately, very glad to join all of you here at the Long Island, looking at the Long Island Nassau Suffolk along with the Queens County activities. So Nadia and I were going to share our presentation together time, but I have to come in now and then drop out quickly. So let me put the PowerPoint slide onto the screen and go over my portion. Sorry for interrupting Nadia's presentation here, but hold 1 second as I do that. Okay, there we are. So sorry for going back and forth between the two speakers. My colleague, Nadia, does very well. And she's going to go over the office market a little more detail. I'm going to briefly comment on some parts on commercial before going into the residential market. One thing that is a little bit concerning at the moment is number of commercial real estate loan that requires refinancing. So as you can see on the chart, it is expected to grow. And generally speaking, commercial practitioners are needing to refinance at a higher interest rate because interest rate was clearly lower a few years ago, but interest rates are higher. So to the degree that the Federal Reserve will cut interest rate, and they will be cutting interest rate next week and more so, that's going to help some of the refinancing, but be mindful there is some refinancing pressure, especially on office market where the property values have come down. Industrial is holding on reasonably well. Multifamily, because of high interest rate environment, some of the property owners, if they need to sell the apartment complex, they need to lower the prices. And this is the overall price trend at the national level. Nadia has some more very specific for your area, but as you can see, the red line separates pre-COVID, post-COVID. The current prices on commercial properties are low, below pre-COVID, trying to recover. Lower interest rate will clearly help on that recovery, but at least it stopped falling. So prices have adjusted, but the transaction volume still is not there. But we do anticipate a little better transaction based on people that I spoke over at the who are tracking this investment activity. But let me go into the economy and what you are seeing on the housing market. So this is the Federal Reserve policy interest rate. They will be cutting interest rate next week and probably one more before the year finishes. But what you notice on this chart is that the increase that you see towards the end, that is the most aggressive hiking of the interest rate in 2 generations. So we have not seen anything like this for a very long time. To the degree that the Federal Reserve wants to normalize mortgage market or interest rate environment, it requires cutting interest rate around 6, 7, 8 rounds. So not only about a few times this year, but even more next year just to get us back to normal. And the consequence of that fast hiking of the interest rate was that mortgage payment needed to buy a home for typical price in America essentially double. Now, of course, in Queens, Long Island, prices are more expensive than the rest of the country, but the trend line will be very, very similar to what you see here, essentially doubling the payment, which is the reason why the sales activity have come down the past couple of years. People simply are tapped out on the finances to buy a home. Cutting the interest rate, bringing the mortgage rate down will clearly improve this chart. So more and more Americans can qualify. And Nadia showed that chart about in our analysis based on the income level in Queens area, income level in Long Island, how many additional buyers will be able to enter the market from the lower interest rate scenario that we put out. So when will the Federal Reserve cut interest rate? Already 100% expectation, it would be next week. But in theory, Federal Reserve would actually like to see inflation closer to 2%. Right now, inflation is running at 2.7%. We are not there yet, but we are very, very close to it. Or if the Federal Reserve is convinced we are moving towards 2%, or if somehow the job market deteriorates, if the job market weakens, then the Federal Reserve will be in much greater hurry to cut more interest rate. So when will the inflation will be under control? Well, the Federal Reserve has been on pause about cutting interest rate because they were concerned about tariff condition. But let's keep in mind, there are other disinflationary pressure. Things like deregulation will make it lower business operating costs, which may be passed on to the consumers. Oil prices, gasoline prices are already back to pre-COVID. That would be disinflationary. And the weaker economy could also be disinflationary. Now, the dollar has weakened somewhat to the degree that the greater New York City, including Queens, have exposure to the foreign buyers. A weaker dollar means you may begin to see more interest among foreign buyers wanting to buy. I'm not sure how many people are buying out in the Hamptons region, very, very expensive. But we generally find that when foreign buyers come into the market, they are essentially targeting few states. Florida, New York, specifically New York City area, along with California market and Texas. So the weakening dollar may help in that regard. Now, as we look at some of the components, housing shelter cost is also becoming disinflationary, as we know, with more inventory coming onto the market. More apartment construction is becoming disinflationary, and also the expectation on how many rate cut by the Fed. This is people who are betting money, not only their opinion, just like people who are betting money on New York Jets winning or not. Well, put your money on where your mouth is. People who are putting money on their mouth regarding Federal Reserve policy, they think it will be 2 or 3 rate cuts this year. But if we were to extend it to 2026, I think we are looking at another 3 or 4 rounds of rate cut next year, which will greatly help on the affordability front. Let me now turn to the job market before turning over to the forecast. This is a nationwide job picture. We are at a record high employment condition today. I know there was some job number revision, but even with the revision, we are still at a record high condition. Now, job gains are weakening. The same chart, put a little differently, how many jobs we are adding each month. As you can see, the job addition is much weaker, but still, given that we are at a record high employment, this is showing potential housing demand, potential commercial real estate demand. Only lower interest rate is needed because this is potential. We have seen low sales activity, but the potential sales activity as reflected from the jobs number is quite high. It's just a matter of trying to see the lower interest rate environment. Now, one area where the job numbers are really weakening is the federal government. I'm in the DC area. We clearly see this, neighbors losing jobs. So maybe that's part of the reason as why the job numbers are not as strong as before, because there's actual job cuts in the federal government employee and in the contractor sector. If we look at the wage growth, which is shown in the red, is beginning to outpace consumer price inflation, which means that now people can save up some money. So at least on the down payment savings for some of the renters, according to the national aggregate data, there's a little more chance to save a little money for the down payment in the future. If we look at state-by-state comparison on the job, what we are finding is that some states are outperforming. Unfortunately, New York State is an underperformer. In fact, whole New England states are underperformer compared to the rest of the country. Despite that, 3.1% more job addition in New York State. That is still, again, building housing demand. So home sales, if the interest rate come down, should be above what it was in pre-COVID. But home sales are still well below pre-COVID condition because of high interest rate situation. If we look at specifically on the job numbers, this is what it looks like. This is New York City proper, including Queens, Staten Island, Manhattan, you know the area. And over there long haul, it has added 1.2 million jobs. So this is a good solid numbers. And I'm sure, you know, you will look at the figures and it's actually more job growth out in the outer boroughs, including Queens. And you can imagine all this more job creation. But if we look at the Nassau-Suffolk County situation, job creation is still occurring. But what I find the most surprising is the COVID lockdown impact. Look at the disaster that occurred during the COVID lockdown, but quickly came back, setting more high in terms of job. But relatively speaking, job addition in the Long Island counties, Nassau and Suffolk, is more minimal compared to what's happening in the city. So city really adding job, Queens included, while the Nassau-Suffolk County is adding job, but maybe not as strongly as before. Let me now look into the residential numbers. Nationwide, past couple of years has been very low. Despite the high jobs, sales are below pre-COVID activity, implying that there's a mismatch. Jobs are there, but not the sales. Maybe the interest rate is an even bigger player than overall job situation. If we look at the monthly figure, we can look into 2025. So not only was 2023 and 2024 difficult, but 2025 so far is also difficult. And I will admit, I was wrong in my forecast. I thought we would see some recovery early part of this year, but we did not see that. I thought we would see interest rate cut early part of this year. We did not see that. So now at least we're in fall next week with the first interest rate cut. Mortgage rate has already adjusting even before the rate cut, 6.4% average mortgage rate. Maybe that will begin to bring about more buyers. Home buying process is not a snap decision. It takes several months. So maybe we will see the data improvement, say in October, November, December, much better, say fourth quarter this year compared to fourth quarter of last year. And this is straight off the Long Island Association website. So you see the price trend that's happening, the Nassau County, Queens, inventory situation, closed sales activity, definitely go to the website to get more information. But I find it quite interesting that the sales price growth is the strongest in your area, essentially the New England states, New York State, the Long Island, New Jersey, somehow everything from New Jersey all the way to Massachusetts is a faster price strength compared to the rest of the country in the past 12 months. And inventory is rising, so at least there is more choice opportunity for the buyers. And also the realtors getting a little more busier in putting that for sale sign up. But when people said that people will be locked in at those low interest rate forever, well, it's not forever. People are changing jobs, people are changing family circumstances, divorces, death in the family, all these life-changing events constantly occurring. So expect even more inventory to show up. We just want more demand now, more demand, and that will come about from lower interest rate environment. And this is the price trend in the Queens, Nassau, Suffolk County. It doesn't include Manhattan. So, that's why the price points are not in the $1 million, but compared to what it was, say, in the year 2000, you see how much wealth accumulation. In fact, here's the 5-year price accumulation that has happened across the country. And New York State, 53% price appreciation in the past 5 years, quite a sizable gain. And consequently, the chart that you want to remind your past client, or maybe show to your prospective client is the following. The real estate asset valuation is on the blue, mortgage debt is on the red, and if you subtract the difference, what you find is net worth in real estate. For most middle-class Americans, this is their net worth. They have some exposure to stock market, but most of the wealth is tied to their real estate and essentially at a record high. Is this a bubble or could it collapse? Just for the sake of time, if you look at the delinquency rate and foreclosure rate, we are still at historically low levels, which is implying that the real estate values on solid ground. Your area seeing much faster price appreciation in the past 12 months compared to the rest of the country, so even stronger in your area. I would say the home prices are on solid ground. What if we face an economic recession with job losses? Well, let's remind ourselves, stock market is at a record high. That is at least implying that any recession, if it occurs, it will be shallow and quick. But even in past recession, we generally find that home prices hold on. Only exception was the Great Recession when these funny subprime mortgages blew up. Then we had a huge mess in housing, huge mess in the economy. But right now, the mortgages are going to people who can repay the mortgages, so a much sounder pattern. And furthermore, people in the blue, 35 million Americans have no mortgage, no chance of foreclosure. So in other words, home prices are on solid ground. Your area even more solid than the rest of the country. And I'm going to end it with a forecast. So one data point that I look at is mortgage application to buy a home. And this has turned solidly positive throughout this year. Now, it did not come to the closing activity, how many people are taking out a mortgage, but it's a serious intent to buy a home. Maybe they're looking for the right inventory, maybe they're waiting for the lower mortgage rate, but the intent, serious intent to buy a home has been solidly positive. So given these conditions, my last slide is that I believe the recovery, which did not happen this year, 2025, did not happen, will simply get pushed into 2026. We know that the Federal Reserve will be doing multiple rounds of rate cut. Consequently, mortgage rate, I think, will be around 6% next year. Not 5%, not 4% mortgage rate, because we have a huge national debt. So that will prevent it from going to 4 or 5%. But 6%, Nadia showed you that simulation, that's going to bring more buyers. So with this condition, I think you should be setting yourself for much improved condition. And Nadia will further go into some of the commercial office market and such. But I have to drop off to go into the next meeting. But I very much appreciate Doreen and the rest of the leadership in the Long Island Association for inviting me to participate. So thank you very much. Now, Nadia, you are back on. So take it over.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you. So I will share my screen again here to talk now about the commercial side as well. So what we see here, I think you're able to see my screen. It will be a good idea to take a look at 3 of the major sectors. So let's take a look at the office, multifamily, and industrial. And let's start with the office market, so which has been, I would say, one of the most debated sectors since the pandemic. So here's the headline. So the New York metro area is outperforming most of the markets across the country. So over specifically the past 12 months. So in the New York metro area absorbed about 5.2 million square feet of office space. So for context, the pre-pandemic average was just 2.1 million. Again, for that specific, for the third quarter, since we are running still on the third quarter. So demand, what we see is that demand is more than double what we used to see. So that's very good news. It's great to see this come back in the New York metro area, in the office sector. And we expect this to continue as well with all these factors. Many people have to go back to their office, some of them 5 days per week. So let's take a look at the vacancy rates. So vacancy rates in New York are lower, about 13.5% compared to 14.1%, which is like the nationwide. So that's still high. But remember, some markets like San Francisco, for example, are pushing vacancy rates of 25 to 30%. So when we have like in New York, like less than 14 and less than the national level, of course, it's like higher than what we want to have. But again, it's like relatively like lower than most of the other areas which makes like New York to outperform compared to the national like level and most of the other like big cities as well. So, but rents for office spaces in New York metro area are even showing like a modest growth. We see like 0.7% locally versus like 0.8% like at the national level. So very close to the national level, like lower, but New York is the bright spot. It's like the comeback like to the office space is great, and I think that's very, very, very good to see for the area. Now let's talk about the multifamily sector, so which is like the real star of the commercial real estate right now. So over the past year, New York absorbed like 30,000 apartment like units compared to a pre-pandemic average of just like 13,000. So that's extraordinary again. Rent growth is running at 2.7%, almost like 3%, nearly triple the national like rate of which is like less than 1% and relatively like flat, very close to the 1%. What we see is that we also see vacancies are extremely tight, just 3.4% locally compared to 8.2%, which is like across the United States. So what's driving this? I will say two big forces. So affordability pressure in the for sale market, as we mentioned, many households that would like to buy simply cannot do because they cannot afford, so they rent like instead. And then, of course, population like stability. We see that New York is losing, still losing like significantly fewer people since people need to go to the office, and that keeps like rental demand like strong. So this creates, of course, opportunities, and we see these opportunities in the multifamily sector in the New York metro area. Finally, I would like to turn to the industrial sector. So this one is interesting because it tells a different story a little bit. So we have, as I mentioned, like office and multifamily outperforming. But for the industrial, after years of booming, we see that industrial has cooled. Net absorption of the past year was actually like negative. We have negative about 850,000 like square feet more vacated than leased for the industrial space. Compared that to a pre-pandemic average of about like 2.3 million square feet. So like more leased than vacated. So this shows that the industrial is slowing down, but this is something that we see it like at the national level as well. It's not that we see it like only in this area. So rents are still like rising, but slowly, 0.9% as you can see locally versus like 1.6% like at the national level. Vacancies are at 7.7%, slightly higher than the national like average. Why? I will say, well, during the pandemic, demand for warehouses and distribution like centers exploded because of e-commerce, as we know. So companies like Amazon lease like huge amounts of space. But as consumer partners like normalized after the pandemic, some of that demand like slowed down. And at the same time, a lot of new industrial space came online, creating like oversupply. So we have this oversupply that we see that at the national level as well. We experience it like as well in our area. So right now, the industrial sector is in a pause, I will say, in a slowdown from the strong like performance that it had like before, and it's just adjusting after several years of intense like growth. In New York, industrial is always going to be important, I think, because of the airport, the port there, the dense consumer like populations. All these factors make this a strategic location. So even if demand like or the numbers have slowed, companies still need like access to logistics, like logistics hubs. So while growth has cooled, I won't write it as still off. Like I'm not worried to see this negative like net absorption. So in fact, a bit of cooling could be like healthy, for example, give like the market time to rebalance. So there, to recap, the commercial like side, office is outperforming compared to the pre-pandemic and compared to most of the markets across our country. Then multifamilies is thriving with absorption, rent growth, and low vacancy, pointing to sustainable, like sustained demand. But industrial, again, like it's cooling, but still a vital, I will say, backbone like of the economy. So the common theme, resilience, as I started like in the beginning. So what comes to me for this area, for Long Island and the broader like area, so it's resilience. Each sector is adapting on its own way, of course, and opportunities are there for those who know where to look. So to wrap up, Long Island's real estate market is resilient, as I mentioned, diverse and constantly like evolving. So yes, there are challenges, especially with affordability and supply, but the fundamentals remain strong. And Lawrence mentioned that as well. So people want to live here, businesses want to be here, and the opportunities are real. So I included in my last slide the links to our market statistics like dashboard. So our new tool that you're able, it's only members, available only for members, that you're able to find all this data by metro area. So we include affordability, we include housing statistics, we include scenarios as the one that I mentioned about what lower rates could mean like for the local market, demographics, and home ownership like trends, and who is buying there as well, like the profiles of and the characteristics of the people who recently bought a home by metro area. So, and also I included the commercial real estate market reports that we also provide. So thank you again for having me, and it was a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have.